Welcome to Hanging Out with Robert, that's me. This video is composed of things that I tinkered with throughout the day. For step-by-step detailed instructions of those tasks, you can click on the links in the comment section below. This video should contain tips and tricks of things that I've learned throughout the year. Now, I only plan on leaving this video posted for about 30 days. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much for watching. We're back here with Peaches. It is still losing coolant, and we're going to go and take it and try to figure out where it's losing its coolant from. At one point it was losing a little bit of coolant, but now it's losing more coolant. So we're going to take it and check it out and see if we can find the coolant leak. Some spray, you see that white ash, that's evidence of coolant spraying. It's probably spraying out of the bottle when they take the cap off when it's hot. I have it right about a little bit above the full line because it was low, but we'll see if it's trying to come out of the cap by the time I get to my sister's place. We're going to take it to my sister's place and explore all of the coolant leak avenues. In this video, we're going to be looking for a coolant leak on this P80 Volvo. Anytime you have a coolant leak in a vehicle that you haven't identified and you're having to add coolant, I call that coolant roulette. I don't think this car has a head gasket issue. Normally, after you drive these cars a few miles, if it has a head gasket issue, the level in the bottle will rise. That is where I put the bottle level before I drove over here. It was low. So they're losing coolant from somewhere, and we're going to try to find it. The problem with small coolant leaks are hot coolant, when it escapes the system, it basically evaporates. And if it's evaporating on you, it's hard to see where it's leaking from. It is not dripping under the car. They said they're losing about a bottle full every 300 miles. To me, that's about 30 ounces. That's a little excessive. However, I like to tell people, as long as your leak doesn't exceed your ability to keep the level good, you should be okay. That goes for coolant, transmission fluid, power steering fluid, or engine oil. So if you can top that bottle off every day with coolant and that doesn't bother you financially, you can keep driving until it's running out quicker than you can fill it up. The absolute best way to find a coolant leak is to take the car in the shop, let them pressurize the system, and find out where it's leaking from. Some people add dye to the coolant, which is in most standard coolants, but not in the stuff that I use for Volvos. But when you have it pressurized, you can usually find where it's leaking. That was unsuccessful with this car because I think it was leaking less when they had that done. Initially, they said it was leaking about a bottle full every 1,000 miles, and now they say it's about a bottle full every 300 miles. I tell people, if something's wrong with it and you can't find it, don't worry about it. It'll get worse. When it gets bad enough, you'll find the problem. As I mentioned, most standard coolant system fluid has the dye detection in it. So I got these glasses and this black light to try to locate where coolant may be seeping out. A lot of times when you have a coolant leak, you'll see a little buildup like you do at the top of that hose there. So I'm going to show you all the points where it is possible that coolant can leak, and we're going to see if we can find where this coolant is leaking from. Now, I've replaced the seal for this thermostat. I've also put a tighter clamp on that, so that should no longer be seeping. And we're going to go over all the points where coolant may be leaking real quick. This is a P80 Volvo. It is built in 1998, a little different from the 99 models. So if you have a turbo model, this indicates that it's turbo, and it was built between 94 and 98. These spots that I'm going to show you that could be leaking coolant, is going to be the same for all of these cars. If you have a car after 1998, which is the 99 and newer, they have a little bit different setup. Nonetheless, you should be able to narrow some of your possible coolant leaks down. Basically, anywhere a coolant, radiator, or heater hose flows, you could have coolant leaking from those locations. So I'm going to show you where those are on this vehicle. And this one has 8 coolant hoses in a couple junctions. So you have a coolant hose here. Coolant could be seeping out of that connection. If it's not tight, it is now tight. Ouch! Coolant can be leaking out here, which is now tight. It shouldn't be leaking out of there. Actually, it's not totally tight, but it doesn't look like it's leaking. Next, you have the hose on the bottom of the coolant reservoir. That hose connects there. You want to make sure the bottom of the reservoir is not leaking and the reservoir is not cracked or leaking anywhere. And that hose runs back to the back of the engine there. And if that hose is damaged, that could be leaking as well. This little hose here is your turbo return. It can leak. This one was replaced within a year ago, so that should not be the problem. Here you have your thermostat housing. If the thermostat gasket is cracked and torn, it can be leaking. You have a housing that normally doesn't leak unless somebody has pulled it, replaced the head, and only put a single gasket on it. We will look down under there in a little bit. So you want to make sure that your thermostat housing is not leaking. This is your upper radiator hose. You want to make sure it's good, it's not spongy, and it's not leaking. It could leak along the radiator, especially if the radiator is cracked. This one had a minor oil leak there that I repaired. It looks like it may be seeping a little oil, but not coolant. The radiators in these cars are aluminum and plastic. The tanks are plastic. When they get old, in excess of 10 years, they can start leaking, or if they're impact driven or something hits them, they could crack, they could split, they could be leaking coolant. So you need to check your radiator really good. The driver's side, on the bottom, you have a radiator hose that goes to the bottom of the radiator. That hose comes up and you can see the sticker on that one that's been replaced there. It comes back and it connects under this turbo intake tube to a pipe there. That can be leaking. It is your lower radiator hose. Those two copper looking pipes in the middle of this frame here are your inlet and your outlet hoses to your heater core. This heater core does not have a heater control valve, so coolant flows through there 24/7. Down there you got a clamp. You could barely see it. It could be leaking coolant if that hose is bad. And on the side of this engine, behind all this piping stuff, is the other hose connection that could be leaking. So you got the two heater core hoses. Another hose that you cannot see that connects to the back of the turbo, where that piping is there, is your coolant supply line. It does have a short rubber hose on it. This one was replaced recently. It should not be leaking. However, I will check the coolant pipe connection to the back of the turbo. If that's leaking, hopefully it'll have some buildup on it, or I could see it with the infrared light. At one point when this car started leaking coolant, the owners started adding your standard type of coolant in there, which should have UV dye detection. So I'm going to see if I can see some of that stuff in there. Another place that coolant can be leaking is out of the water pump. So you can pull your timing belt cover, look at your water pump area, see if you see any evidence of coolant leaking out of there. Behind the carpet, you have the heater core. I'm pretty sure this heater core was replaced not too long ago. I did not see or smell any coolant down there. If you have coolant leaking from your heater core,
You can often smell it through your vents when you turn the heat on, and when you pull this carpet back in this lower panel, you can often see evidence of a coolant leak. Now my next step is going to be to close the garage door, put those infrared goggles on, and turn on that black light and see if I could see anything glowing on this coolant system. Under your coolant hose there, you have your ECT coolant temp sensor, and if that seal or gasket is messed up, it could be leaking down there as well. So that's your thermostat housing, that's your ECT. It does not appear to be leaking. If you have a coolant leak and it's not leaking where you can find it easily, you may want to go to the auto parts store and purchase some coolant dye detection fluid, put it in the reservoir or in the radiator, drive the car a few days, and then get the glasses and the light and see if you can spot where it's leaking from. You want to get a grip and fix your coolant leaks before you leak too much coolant out, playing coolant roulette, and blow your head gasket. Occasionally I've heard of that firewall junction where those lines go through the firewall, crack, and leak coolant, so you want to check that as well. So there's a lot of areas that you could check. Now normally if these cars have a bad head gasket and they're running as good as this one is, the combustion air will fill up the coolant chamber and force fluid out of the reservoir. That is not going on here. Also, we do not have any coolant mixing in the engine oil, or the engine oil would be becoming milky, and that is rare for a car with a double overhead cam. I don't even see any oil on this dipstick, so let me dip this dipstick and see if this car even has any oil in it. That might be oil on the bottom of it, but there's none within the operating range. So they need to get some oil in this vehicle. I have the glasses on and my black light on. Let me look around and see if I can find anything glowing. Here's your lower radiator hose here that goes up to the tube on the engine. So you want to check along this side of the radiator, down along the back of it, and as much as you can inside of it. And you could look through the grill as well, see if the radiator has a crack in it somewhere in the coil. You could also check the pipe on the back of the turbo and the coolant hoses coming off the turbo. That one there, that rubber hose, make sure that's not leaking. And you can see the bottom of the hose up there, and your coolant pipe that runs along the back of the engine. Well, kind of a weird thing is, I do have some glowing along the pipe where the exhaust flange connects and the downpipe connects. All that looks a little glowing, so this thing may be burping a little coolant out of the engine internally. That's kind of rare for this vehicle, but I do see a lot of glowing there. So this may be an internal problem. I'm going to check one more area. I'm going to pull the timing belt cover, see if I can see anything in there. So there you have it. You got your radiator hose, upper, your lower radiator hose, your two coolant heater core hoses, your turbo inlet hose, your turbo outlet hose, your two hoses coming from your bottle, your water pump, the heater core, and then of course internal engine problem and your radiator. So I think we've covered all the bases of where to look for coolant leaks. If you got any questions, go ahead and post them. However, short of you bringing the vehicle to me and letting me help you search for it, I'm really probably not going to be able to help you figure out where it's leaking from without looking at it. If you feel that this information was useful, please like it and share it with your social media friends. You can subscribe to my channel so that you will get notifications of future videos that I post. You can follow me on Twitter, and if you need to contact me directly, please visit my website. And if you have any questions, leave them below, and someone or myself will reply to them. Again, thank you very much for watching.